Across the UK, online and on DAB.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio, we'll get you talking.
Listen up, comrades of the world. Unite! He's a weapon of mass discussion, and he's back on your radio.
Get ready for a revolutionary rumble on your radio with the original George of the political jungle.
Galloway, celebrate. The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway. Come have a go if you think you're hard enough. Get it? On the radio station that gives power to the people.
Talk Radio, we'll get you talking.
So it's the crab against the fox for the Tory leadership, at least so far, but the two elephants in the room, Boris Johnson and Theresa May, will presumably not be long absent from the starters block. And farce piles upon farce in the Labour Party coup, which still hasn't got a candidate, but which has a deputy leader who says the leader has to go. And we'll be looking at the atrocity in Istanbul, where 41 people have been killed and scores more maimed and mutilated, presumably, though not yet certainly, by the death cult known as ISIS. That and much more in the next 3 hours.
Controversial conversation and cutting-edge current affairs comment with the notorious B.I.G.G.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio.
Listen, this guy's a nightmare. He's not a great guy, folks.
Let's start with the Istanbul story, not least because few others are doing so. Turkey is observing a national day of mourning after a gun and suicide bomb attack on Istanbul's Ataturk airport killed 41 people, including 13 foreign nationals. 239 people were injured. 41 of them are still in intensive care. 3 attackers, just like in Brussels at the airport, arrived in a taxi and began firing at the terminal entrance late on Tuesday. Then they blew themselves up after police fired back. No one has so far admitted carrying out the attack, but it is thought to be yet another atrocity, another mass murder carried out by the death cult that we have come to know as ISIS. There are many, many layers to this story. Let's deal with one that we shouldn't rule out, that it was carried out not by ISIS, but by Kurdish separatists or other extremist organizations. I myself doubt that, but it is not impossible. Suicide attacks have been carried out by Turkish leftist and separatist forces before. So it's not impossible, in the light of the absence of a claim of responsibility by ISIS, who are never normally slow in claiming responsibility for these kind of bloodbaths, it's not impossible that it was not ISIS. But I'm going to work, as the Turkish government is working, on the premise that it is likely to have been carried out by ISIS. That opens up then the issue of Turkey's real relationship with ISIS over the last almost 5 years, because it is widely believed, and I don't think it can be contradicted in any way convincingly, that Turkey has been hand in hand with the extremist forces that have taken control of much of Syria and much of Iraq, who are now on the back foot, losing territory, but certainly not dead yet. The Turkish government has been importing stolen oil from ISIS that they stole from Iraq and Syria. That is a matter of fact that cannot be gainsaid. The borders for many years were effectively open for more than 100,000 foreign fighters to cross from Turkey into Syria. It seems to me that the Turkish government of President Erdogan played the role of Dr. Frankenstein in helping to create this great monster, only to discover that the reason a monster is called a monster is because you can't control it once you have built it. But the price has not been paid by the Turkish government, but again by ordinary Turkish civilians, and in some cases, I think 13 foreign nationals have also paid with their lives for the existence and ability to cause murder and mayhem of ISIS. The Turkish government played a very gruesome game with the European Union on the subject of Syrian refugees and Iraqi refugees for that matter. Sometimes it turned on the tap, sometimes it promised to turn off the tap, but it only would turn off the tap in exchange for concessions, principally about Turkish membership of the European Union. They're supposedly checking the flow of Syrian and Iraqi refugees headed for the European Union, but there's no sign at all of that flow being stemmed. So Turkey, like many other countries, are paying the price for failing to differentiate between a regime that you don't like, i.e. the Syrian regime, and a force that you cannot possibly control and cannot possibly wish to prevail. And I want to open up those issues in the course of the next 3 hours. And we'll keep you updated, of course, as the death toll presumably mounts. As I said, 239 people were seriously injured. 41 of those are still in intensive care. We'll be talking to, I hope, to someone from UNICEF about a report out of New York dated today, which says poor children are twice as likely to die before the age of 5, and poor girls are more than twice as likely to become child brides. Well, of course, none of that is rocket science. Poor people die young, much younger than people who are not poor. And poor girls are particularly vulnerable to all the horrors of child marriage and other disgraceful phenomena. But I want to put it in the context, because I just saw Gordon Brown strutting around the television studios on another matter. We were supposed, were we not, to have made poverty history. Wasn't that what the whole Bono and Geldof and Millennium Goals and Make Poverty History and Write Off the Debt and all of these very fine-sounding slogans that we were told? I remember the cheers as Gordon Brown and Bono saved the world. But it turns out from this report from UNICEF today that the poor are just as poor as they ever were. I'm talking about an issue, as you know, on the radio. I've proved over many years that I'm sometimes counterintuitive on some issues. And I always say, never confuse me with a liberal. So when I was told by my colleagues behind the glass here that they wanted to deal with the issue of the U.S. Border Authority seeking travelers' social media details before allowing them visa waiver entry to the U.S., I'm supposing that some of my colleagues thought that I would take a classically liberal view about that. Is this Big Brother looming on the big screen again? But the truth is, your social media profile tells us more about you than anything you're going to write on a visa waiver application form. It tells more even than you might like to think about yourself. It tells more, and I know that. I have 1 million followers on social media. I interact with them, particularly on Twitter and Facebook, all the time. And the vast majority of people are sane and rational, even those hiding behind a supposed anonymity. But there are dark, dark, dark individuals out there who only actually can be seen in any light at all on social media. And every country has the right to control who comes in across their border. And every country has the right to be sure that that person is somebody that they would actually want to be in their country. And I think it's perfectly within the rights of the United States Border Agency to want to know if you present yourself as plain John Doe, but in fact on Twitter you're a dark knight who's threatening and cursing and profaning everything that people have a right to be anxious about. I have stalkers on Twitter. I'm talking real stalkers who put my picture on their profile, who adopt variants of my name, and who spend all day and every day printing, publishing, tweeting the most fantastical lies about me, and very often implicitly or explicitly threatening me. Now, if that person, because I cannot know who they are, was to turn up at my door, I'd be very anxious indeed. And so I want to know who these people are. And if I was in charge of our borders or the United States borders, I'd want to know who you were on Twitter, on Facebook, before I gave you any waiver, indeed. Now, there's the Labour Party, there's the Tory Party, there's so much to talk about tonight. There's the Goves, revealed as Francis Urquhart and his missus, the power couple, where the wife is sending emails by accident to all and sundry, which reveal, as Sky News put it, something of the Lady Macbeth about her. There's that, and there's Tom Watson, about whom more later.
Come have a go if you think you're hard enough. Get it? The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
Now, I only know three things about Stephen Crabb. First of all, he's got a really neat beard. Secondly, he's got a rather nice smile. No, four things. Thirdly, he's from a much poorer background than some of those he's likely to face in the Conservative Party leadership race. I don't know if he's working class or lower middle class, but he's definitely not a posh boy, Eton and the Bullingdon Club. And the fourth thing I know about him, which seems to me is his most difficult obstacle in succeeding, is that he voted against gay marriage. He says he would do so again, and he made some statements which some would regard as very, very difficult in Britain in 2016 on that subject. But I am going to talk to someone who knows far more about him than me. He's Mark Edwards. He's a Pembrokeshire councillor, and he's a close friend of Mr. Crabb. Mark, thanks for joining us tonight.
Pleasure.
Thank
you for asking.
Tell us what we should know about Stephen Crabb.
Stephen is a really down-to-earth, genuinely nice, chap. He's one of the boys. He comes into Haverfordwest. He'll have a pint. He'll go around the local pubs, and he's a hard-working member of Parliament.
I'm not sure that going around the local pubs is necessarily his best foot forward. Tell us something about what he stands for.
He's genuinely, he's a Christian, but he's a genuinely...
What kind of Christian? Is he an evangelical? Is that where the anti-gay marriage thing came from?
I don't know. I don't really know much about, that with Stephen. But what I'm saying is he's a genuinely nice, hard-working... I've done surgeries with him in my local ward. People would come in and talk about their broken fence, and he'll sit with them, he'll stay there for half an hour, or whatever. He is genuinely, he's interested in everyone, and, he will make a fantastic Prime Minister.
Well, that might be true, though nothing you've said so far persuades me. We know he goes around the local pubs, that he's a Christian and he's really nice. What does he stand for? What's the difference between him and the other Tory candidates?
Well, Stephen, he is genuinely, he could be a Labour member of Parliament. He's interested in the working class. He's interested in all sorts of people from, all walks of life. I've known Stephen now for about 15 years. And genuinely, when we go out, he'll talk and he's interested in everybody's problems. And, there's nothing too much for him. Nothing will faze. And he's a really hard-working chap, So I don't really know what else I could say.
Well, what about the big issue of the European Union? He campaigned to remain in it. Some say, I'm not sure if it's true, but some say the Tory party can now only be led by someone who was a Brexiter.
Well, I disagree on that, because I think that Stephen is the man to unite the party. Boris, Theresa May, yes, they're very, very strong candidates, but I truly believe that Stephen is an outsider. He's the person to come in. He works on a building site. He's from a one-parent family. He's from a council house. He is a person. He's genuinely hard-working, and
that is quite an interesting backstory for a Tory leader. Did you say from a single-parent household, from a council house? Worked on a building site. That's definitely not your normal Tory leader profile. And it certainly contrasts with Boris Johnson and the other posh boys and girls that are going to be running.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. He genuinely is, the normal Conservative member of Parliament, if you like. He's something for everyone. He could be any member of Parliament, any political party, but he is. I truly believe that once people get to know him and see what he's like and understand what he's saying, they'll take to him.
Well, you've done your best, and you've certainly persuaded me that he's a nice fellow. We'll see how far that gets him in the nasty party.
But hard-working.
Go on, Mark. Yeah, go on.
Yeah. Hard-working.
Yeah, nice and hard-working. Yeah.
Yeah.
You've persuaded me of that. I'm definitely going to take your word for that. Thanks very much, Mark Edwards, Pembrokeshire councillor, close friend of Stephen Crabb. Stephen is the one of the first two in the starting lineup for the Tory leadership. The other is Liam Fox, whom I do know very well, have travelled with overseas, though I promise you, Liam, my lips are sealed. And he's, of course, a politician of the right, quite hawkish, and quite different. Although actually from not a rich background, a man from Glasgow who became a medical doctor and has been a prominent member of Parliament for a long time. So that's the Crab and the Fox at the starting lineup. But of course, the two elephants in the room are Boris Johnson and Theresa May. Now, I've known both of them for a long time. Theresa May for longer, because she's been in Parliament for longer. But of course, everybody knows, or thinks they do, knows Boris Johnson. The fact that the Right Honourable David Davis came out for Boris Johnson in the press this morning, rather than running himself, was a disappointment to me. But if you heard my interview last night with Andrew Mitchell, that won't have come as any surprise to you. Michael Gove is also supporting Boris Johnson. Although thanks to Mrs. Gove, we now know that there are some tensions there, because Mrs. Gove unwittingly sent an email to all and sundry, which predictably, of course, has been leaked, in which she gave the strictest instructions to her husband on how he should conduct his negotiations with Boris Johnson. And perhaps more embarrassingly, made it clear that hardly anybody trusts Boris Johnson. She names some of the people. Rupert Murdoch, she says, doesn't trust him. Paul Dacre, the editor of the Daily Mail doesn't trust him. Well, that would probably endear him to many of the people listening here, if that were possible. But the fact that she has committed to writing that her husband will have to get copper-bottomed, absolutely fastened down assurances, as she put it, from Boris before he will run in tandem with him, leaves the question of what assurances it is that the power couple are seeking. Is it about a job? Is it about policies? Who knows? But everyone will now be having a guess. So Theresa May is, in my opinion, worthy, competent, but dull. Now, the Tories might go for that. They did go, after all, for Margaret Thatcher in the 1970s, and that led to a very long period indeed of right-wing Thatcherite conservative rule. Maybe the Tories quite like the firm smack of nurse, of the governess. Maybe they like a strict woman. Some of them are educated in schools where that kind of thing happens a lot. Well, look, there's a lot going to be happening tonight, and I've just sketched some of the outlines for it. Coming up later, we're talking about the UNICEF report. We're talking about the Turkish atrocity in Istanbul. We're talking about what should be the new name of the new Labour Party. It was revealed this evening that one Labour member of the European Parliament has publicly gone on the record to say she will join a new party, which will emerge, she believes, from the carnage in the Labour Party going on at the minute. And they've been negotiating in various places as to what rights they have to what name. Ian Lee, of course, is on the air after me at 10, and his radio is riveting and a must listen to. So, this is the mother of all talk shows. I'm George Galloway on Talk Radio.
He's a weapon of mass discussion, and he's back on your radio. The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway
On Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
We will indeed. And the number for you to talk is 0844 499 1000. That's 0844 499 1000. If you hit the phones now, you'll get through to me. You call us, we'll call you back. 0844 499 1000. You can email me via the website at talkradio.co.uk. You can text, if you text TALK, followed by your message, to 87222. That's 87222, and that'll cost you 25 pence plus normal sending charges. But you can also tweet me, as a huge number of people are now already doing, either at Talk Radio or at George Galloway. And you can follow us, of course, on Facebook, and our Facebook is facebook.com/talkradiouk. Let me read some of those that have come through, if I may. I asked what should be the name of the new Labour Party. Balder the Brave says the Third Way Party. Somebody called George Galloway says there's only one name possible, the War Party. Thomas Northall said they should be called the Disciples of Thatcher and Blair Party. There's some more here, but I'm not able quite to get to them. So let me turn to the Liberal Democrats. Now, the Liberal Democrats have a real opportunity here. The only way is up for them. They had a disastrous general election in 2015. They're reduced to 8 MPs. A very well-known Liberal Democrat leader, Nick Clegg, was replaced by a rather lesser-known Tim Farron. Although I must say, when I've been on Question Time with Tim Farron, he quite impressed me, actually, both as a person and as a close-quarter debater. But their profile was, until last Thursday, apparently almost invisible. But they have rather acutely identified that there's 16 million people in Britain who wanted to stay in the European Union. They know that none of the other parties are going to run in the next general election on the platform, we will rejoin the European Union. And so the Liberals have said, Liberal Democrats have said, that'll be our policy. It helps that they actually genuinely believe in it. And they'll be able to say to that 16 million, if you vote for us and we're in government, we'll seek to rejoin the European Union. Now, I say as a slight caveat to that, if Britain were to go back into the European Union, it could only be on the condition that we adopted the euro and joined the eurozone, which hasn't been going all that well. So don't imagine that they'll automatically get 16 million votes. If they did, they'd be in power. But they could do quite well, and their position could be transformed. And who knows what's going to happen in the Labour and even in the Conservative parties. Maybe there'll be breakaways. Maybe there'll be mergers. This is all probably horrifying my next guest, my former parliamentary colleague, former Member of Parliament for Richmond, when the Lib Dems had a huge parliamentary group, now in the House of Lords, Baroness Susan Kramer. Susan, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be on.
Now, I summed up there how I see it. Did that sound plausible to you?
Well, I mean, my first sort of reaction is just so right now being in Parliament. I mean, it's a pretty horrifying experience. It's got to feel even worse out in the country. But effectively, we don't have a government. I mean, as we try and get the government of the day to answer questions, the answer just always comes back, well, we really can't say anything about that, no matter how fundamental, because until we get a new Prime Minister. So, I mean, many of us are talking with businesses and employers up and down the country, and that's small companies as well, trying to work out what the heck to do. There's no idea what the picture is meant to look like with Brexit and getting no information. And I'm thinking, how long can I wait till I start to make a decision and look after myself? So, there's a lot of difficulty and bad. It's just leaderless, which is just appalling. Well, and then on the other side, you would have thought the Labour Party would be there as a strong... We need Labour as a strong opposition. And frankly, well, they're just simply in turmoil. So, we basically are standing there asking those questions, driving the issues, putting pressure on the government to try and come up with answers. And I think I've almost overwhelmed any sense of the party positioning. We're just trying to get something closer to functional that's in a crisis where we seem to have no government and no opposition either.
Well, Susan,
in the long run, we believe in Europe. That doesn't change because we lost in the referendum. We recognise, though, the verdict to the referendum, that the decision is to go for Brexit. We recognise the democratic will of the people, but it doesn't change what's in our hearts. And the belief that for the British people over the long run, this is the much better way to have prosperity, good opportunities. Our youngsters believe the same thing and voted that way as well.
So Tim wasn't just shooting from the lip. It is going to be your election platform that Britain should apply to rejoin the European Union, yeah?
Well, we haven't even got, we're trying to deal with triage at the moment. This is like being in an emergency room when you're in Parliament at the moment. Just, as I say, there's no leadership, there's no opposition. It's like being on a ship and there's absolutely nobody controlling or from either of the two parties attempting to control the wheel, and the winds are blowing hard. So most of our focus is just on trying to do triage now and get someone to get a grip. So that's where the focus is. I mean, we haven't sat down and talked about manifestos. Maybe at some point there's going to be a general election. People would want to hear much more from us than just our views on Europe. And there has been no time, and it's not a priority to sit down and work through that, quite frankly, because at the moment we've got to try and do everything we can to keep the ship from hitting rocks over the next several weeks, and I'm not even sure when we get a new Conservative Prime Minister that we'll have a clue of where we're going.
So it's premature then. It's too early to say that the Liberal Democrats will pledge to take Britain back into the EU.
Well, we just haven't thought. I mean, where we are, where we do not change is that we believe that the long-term future of the country is better off inside the European Union. We absolutely believe that. But have we sat down and started thinking through how would you do that? What would it look like? All those kinds of things. We don't even know what exit is going to look like.
No, that's true. So never mind re-entry.
We're not sitting down doing that. We're trying to basically do everything that we can to keep the ship from hitting rocks over the next several weeks.
Are you preparing for an early election?
We have no control over whether or not there's an election. I think it might be healthy to have one, so that at least, we're both Democrats, aren't we? Mm-hmm. And you think that basically, one party is going to pick a new person to be their leader who will then become the prime minister. I mean, it is the way our system has worked, but in the modern era, it seems to me that person at some point needs to put themselves in front of the electorate.
I'll just tell you,
when they're coming up with a completely new plan that no one had ever heard of at the time of the last general election.
Well, that's right. And I'll remind you that David Cameron told Gordon Brown that he had no right to sit there as prime minister without going to the country for a general election.
I mean, you're exactly right on that issue. But, I mean, we won't control the timing of that. But it seems to me at some point, surely it's inevitable. I mean, I don't know whether that's early next year or whether it comes later in the negotiation process. I don't know. I mean, in our system, it will be the new incoming Prime Minister that will pretty much govern that.
Susan, it's been a pleasure talking to you again. Thanks very much for joining us. That was Baroness Susan Kramer, current Lib Dem Treasury spokeswoman and former member of the House of Commons and an important person in the Liberal Democrats, who now may, just out of the blue or from nowhere, be back in play as a serious force in British politics.
Listener comrades of the world, unite! The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio, we'll get you talking.
And the number for you to talk is 0844 499 1000. That's 0844 499 1000. You call us, we'll call you back. Now, earlier I asked for suggested names for the breakaway party that may well be in formation now amongst the bulk of, at least, the rebels or renegades, as some would call them, who have caused this tremendous eruption inside the Labour Party. I threw out my own name for it, the War Party. Others have got more amusing ones, but I also asked what might be their theme tune. Mac the Knife was one. The Great Pretender by the Platters was another. Let's see, Maureen says the opposite to New Labour, I think. How about Old Skyverse? That's Maureen Fitzsimmons. Hi, Maureen. Another, James Ball, says Le Arrogance, the Hillarys, or the Hole in the Back Party. Well, there's lots more where that came from, but keep them coming on the Twitter at George Galloway or at Talk Radio. I'm slipping into my old habits there. Another says, I can't believe it's not the Tories. That's quite a good one. Here's Sarah in Cambridge. She was at a rally in support of Jeremy Corbyn. Sarah, tell me about it.
Oh, yes, George. Well, we spoke last night, and I've just come home from attending a rally of more than 100 people in central Cambridge outside Great St Mary's Church, where Jeremy spoke to 1,500 people. He packed the church last September, and the overspill was more than 200. That was then. But tonight, people were gathered together, many trades unionists, local councillors, local loyal Labour Party supporters and supporters of Jeremy, and the meeting was united in its support for him. And speech after speech denounced the traitors, that was the word, the traitors in the Parliamentary Labour Party. And I had the opportunity, I pointed out the Chilcot report would be published next Wednesday, and the Blairites were terrified of Jeremy Corbyn as leader at the dispatch box and what could follow. And there were chants, Blair in jail. I won't go down too much about that, but the meeting was supportive and angry. So I just wanted to feed that into the programme.
Well, I'm glad you did, and thanks for that report from the front.
That's from Cambridge.
Yeah, well, it's going on everywhere. Let's just summarise where we are now. The deputy leader, no less, of the Labour Party has said on the record to the BBC that the leader has to go, but that he's not standing down. Now, that's an unprecedented situation, I think we can agree.
Yes.
And what it undoubtedly means, that if the leader doesn't go, the deputy leader who said he had to go will himself have to go. You can't possibly have a deputy leader who said you had to go, then you went for an election and you were re-elected, and you can't continue. So if there's going to be a leadership election, it seems to me there's going to have to be a deputy leader election also. Unless Tom is going to say that Laura at the BBC was lying when she said what she said today in the media. And I don't rule that out because Laura is not the most dependable of sources in my view. But if he did say that, and his several hours have gone by and he hasn't contradicted it, then it places Labour in an even deeper crisis, having a leadership election and a deputy leader election. Secondly, we don't yet have a candidate. Watson has ruled himself out, but Eagle has not yet ruled herself in. She's going to tell us tomorrow whether she's going to stand. So what if she comes tomorrow and says, actually, I'm not now going to stand for the leadership? Where's that going to leave us?
Yes, and she doesn't have the support of her Wallasey constituency in Cheshire.
Her constituency voted overwhelmingly to demand that she supports Corbyn.
Exactly. And there are meetings like this, as you say, all over the country. But the other rallying cry tonight was Tories out, Corbyn in. And
yes, my own grandchildren, some of them 2 or 3 years old, are chanting that. Sarah, thanks. Good to talk to you again.
All right.
Let's go to Charisse in Coventry. Charisse, Labour Party, what's going on, you're asking? Tell me.
Yeah, I'm just a bit confused because they're saying that Jeremy Corbyn isn't a strong leader, or they don't think he could be a strong leader. Yet, as far as I can see, to stand up to all the pressure that he's getting from every side, including his own, that's a hell of a strong man to be doing that. And also, why this political suicide by the Labour Party? I just don't get it. I mean, surely the membership voted the man there. So that's democracy in action, isn't it? What's going on?
It is, and they're not coming across as particularly strong themselves, are they? Angela Eagle broke down in tears in public on television just the other day. In fact, all the dames have been crying. It's quite a pantomime. Lots of dames in this picture. Dame Margaret Beckett, Dame Margaret Hodge, Dame Tessa Jowell, Dame Harriet Harman. They've all been either in tears or on the verge of tears as they told us how heavy a heart they had as they knifed their leader in the back, side and front. But Angela is not even yet a candidate. Tom, who says the leader has to go, has ruled himself out of being a candidate. So, I mean, they're looking for strong leadership, but they're trying to get rid of the guy who's there, and none of them seem to be prepared to step up to the plate and contest the election, largely because they know that they're going to lose it, I think, Charisse.
Well, I certainly think so. I mean, I joined the Labour Party because of what Jeremy Corbyn was saying. I actively joined because of the man. And so it beggars belief to me what's going on. And it's the timing of the thing. I don't understand why they're doing this now. I mean, if they were genuinely concerned about the party and the people of this country, then they'd have waited, wouldn't they, and sorted out things in-house first.
They've been waiting for this moment, Charisse, and it's a kind of midsummer madness. And it has gone off in such a way as to make it clear that they never really had a plan beyond bullying Jeremy Corbyn, breaking him as a man, as someone said at the meeting of the Parliamentary Labour Party on Monday. They wanted to break him as a man and force him to stand down and not have him on the ballot for the new leader. Now, they failed in that. I've known Jeremy Corbyn for almost 40 years. He's a man of steel. He's not breakable. And he's encouraged, I'm sure, by the support that is flooding in from all over the country, the big union leaders tonight, promising him their full support. The failure of a candidate to emerge. Now, this will put the tin hat on it, or the tin foil hat on it, if all of this has been done, and then there is no candidate to stand against Jeremy Corbyn. And I really don't know what these people could do thereafter, where they could go thereafter. Do you?
I really don't. I don't, Mr. Galloway. I mean, I'm just thinking if the people didn't want the sort of politics that Labour was offering before, why do they think they want it now? I mean, the whole point of this is it's a new broom sweeping clean.
Exactly.
It's more of a radical politics, but surely under the present circumstances, there's been the world's turned upside down, and if we don't need the sort of policies that Mr. Corbyn is offering and a new way forward, when do we need them? We need them now.
Quite so.
We need them now.
Well, thanks, Charisse in Coventry for that. If you want to join in this discussion, 0844 499 1000. That's the number to call. Or you can tweet, as Chris Sansom has, the people voted him in and the people are behind him. Backbenchers should not be dictating. We want Corbyn to lead, says Chris. And Colin says, hi, George, a name for the Labour rebels, Blair's Babes. Get back into Parliament, George, he says. Well, who knows what lies round the corner. Can they, asks someone by SMS, I don't have a name, can they keep legally Corbyn off the ballot paper if a new leadership race kicks off? Absolutely, definitively not. Akib says, surely the new Labour Party should be neither here nor there party. Alternatively, they can join the Tories. Well, I'm not sure about the Tories, Akib, but they may join up with some Europhile Tories and the Europhile Liberal Democrats and the Europhile Blairites. That's got the makings of a party to me. Balder again says, no, I think I've read that one, the Third Way Party, and so on. Here we have, I think, a caller coming through. Have I got time to squeeze this in before the break? I possibly don't. Now, I've opined about the Labour Party and about the Liberal Democrats and about the Conservative Party. I've told you what I think about Turkey and ISIS, and I'm going to, with the aid of a guest, talk you through the new UNICEF report about child poverty in the world, in our own country, by the way, as well as in the world. Child poverty still stalks the land and many, many other lands. So we've got lots to talk about. If you want to contribute on any of those things, then you need to call me on 0844 499 1000. That's the number to call. That'll cost you 7 pence per minute, but if you call us, we'll call you back, and it'll therefore cost you virtually nothing. You can email through the website at talkradio.co.uk or text talk and then your message to 87222, or you can tweet me or you can tweet talk radio, and lots of people are. I must say, I've never known a radio show with such a busy social media profile. We're also going to be talking about the new decision in the United States to ask people who are asking for a visa waiver what their Twitter name is and what their Facebook identity is, because they think that it will help them understand the character of the person who is applying to come in. And I must tell you, I think that's a sensible idea. It's the first sensible idea I've heard out of the Homeland Security business in the United States for a very, very long time. It seems to me that people reveal themselves, sometimes unwittingly, unconsciously, subconsciously, on Twitter and on Facebook in a way that they would never do in real life. And I think any country that's guarding its borders has the right to know who is coming into their country. And you can learn at least as much about someone from who they are and what they say and do on social media. So I agree with that Department of Homeland Security position that they have outlined today, whether the Liberals, small l, Liberals, like it or not. So we heard earlier from Mark Edwards, who is a Pembrokeshire councillor and a close friend of Stephen Crabb. I have conceded that I don't know anything about Stephen. I know a little bit more about him now after talking with Mark. But if you know anything about him, particularly on that gay marriage thing, I think we might explore that in the next couple of hours, because it seems to me it's difficult for the Tories to be in an election led by a man who wants to turn the clock back on people's sexuality.
Across the UK, online and on DAB.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio, we'll get you talking.
Listen up, comrades of the world. Unite! He's a weapon of mass discussion, and he's back on your radio.
Get ready for a revolutionary rumble on your radio with the original George of the political jungle.
Galloway celebrates the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway. Come have a go if you think you're hard enough. Get it? On the radio station that gives power to the people.
Talk Radio, we'll get you talking.
Well, what's that all about? The deputy leader of the Labour Party says the party is facing an existential crisis. That is to say, a threat to its very existence. But that he will not put himself forward as a candidate for leader. He says that the leader has to go, but he won't stand in order to force him to go. The woman, in floods of tears, just the other day, says she'll tell us tomorrow if she's going to stand. If she stands, she's going to be overwhelmingly defeated. That much is already clear. So what are these people up to? That's what I'm asking here on the mother of all talk shows.
Controversial conversation and cutting-edge current affairs comment with the notorious B.I.G.G.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio.
Listen, this guy's a nightmare. He's not a great guy, folks.
Well, Donald Trump thinks I'm a nightmare and I'm not a good guy, folks, so I wear that as a badge of honour. Whatever you think of what I stand for and what I believe in, I want to hear from you. In fact, if you disagree with me, you're even more welcome than if you agree with me. Because this is the University of the Airwaves. At least it was for 7 wonderful years when this show appeared on TalkSport. And now that I'm back, normally just on Friday nights between 7 and 10, I want it to be that again. So, if you are someone who doesn't agree with me, don't feel intimidated. As you have already heard with John Redwood, Nigel Farage, Susan Kramer, and many other people, I'm able to talk to people that I fundamentally disagree with without it turning into some kind of brawl. If you've got a sensible point of view with certain caveats, I don't put up with racism and other things like that, but if you've got a sensible point of view, I'm ready to hear it, and I'm ready to discuss it with you in a calm and rational way. 0844 499 1000. That's the number to dial to join the mother of all talk shows. And now, I've got a caller on the line, but no name. Who is this I'm going to? Ah, perfect. This is the story that I mentioned earlier about the U.S. Border Authority seeking travelers' social media details. I've already told you what I think. Let's hear from Renata Sampson, who's the chief executive of Big Brother Watch, which, Renata, I presume, doesn't mean watching Big Brother on the British TV. It's a monitoring organization, isn't it, looking at the surveillance state. Have I got that right? Renata? Have we lost her? We appear to. Renata, are you on the line? Okay, let me continue where I was before I was rudely interrupted with that non-call from the United States. I was talking about the Labour Party and the farce that we now have. And I'm really angry at Tom Watson's comments that the Labour Party is in an existential crisis and that the leader has to go. But he will not stand in order to push him out. And the reason that he will not stand is because he knows that if he does, it will be him that is pushed out. This is a kind of nihilism, anarchy that's going on in the Labour Party and from some of the most unlikely sources. Now, as I said, the U.S. Border Agency is going to require, well, not require, it will be optional, but it will obviously be held against you if you don't volunteer it. It's going to require your social media names and therefore opening up the possibility of your activity on social media being looked at by the Homeland Security Department before giving you a visa waiver. I think that's an extremely sensible approach to take. But Renata Sampson from Big Brother Watch might have a different point of view. Renata, welcome to the show.
Hello, am I here now?
You
Can
are.
You hear me?
You are. Where are you calling from?
Oh, I'm in central London, George.
My
forgive
goodness.
me, I don't know what technical hitch happened.
Don't worry. You're loud and clear now, and I'm glad to hear from you, Renata. I always say never confuse me with a liberal. Countries have the right, the duty to protect themselves, and they have the right to decide who comes into their country, particularly without a visa in a waiver system like the U.S. has for much of the world. So if they ask you questions on a piece of paper, when you go into the U.S., they ask you, what is it, if you've been involved in any moral turpitude. I never actually knew what moral turpitude precisely meant, and I was always wary of saying no or yes when I ticked that box. But whatever you say on a piece of paper is one thing, but what you've been saying, perhaps under a false name, on Twitter over the previous months and years, might be a legitimate thing for the security agencies to know. Don't you think?
Well, but George, if the U.S. border control said to you, you're only welcome into our country if you hand us the keys to your house so we can have a bit of a shufty about and see where you sleep, what you read, what television programs you've been watching, who your partner is, who you've recently had round for dinner, you might feel that was a bit of intrusion, wouldn't you?
Well, first of all, I would accept that it's the business of the United States to decide who comes into their country and what the terms and conditions are. I wouldn't go to the United States if those were the conditions. But what my house looks like is not quite as significant as what I'm saying and doing on Twitter. What if I was, for example, presenting as John Doe, an ordinary guy from London, wanting to go to the United States, but in the nighttime hours, I'm not John Doe, I'm the nighttime avenger, punting out all kinds of extremist and violent imagery. It doesn't need to be political. Chances are it would be. Could be political. Could be religious. Could be sexual. Could be any kind. Now, why shouldn't the U.S. authorities have the right to know that?
But if that were the case, George, do you really think if the U.S. authorities were going to ask you on a piece of paper that you'd be inclined to suddenly hand over that anonymous Twitter feed that you've been posting those messages on? Now, I assume that people who are going to be asked this, the majority of people will happily hand over their Twitter handle or their Facebook account. I would feel slightly uncomfortable with them doing that. But those who suspect that they have nothing to hide, nothing to fear, will hand over that information. The people who may not actually be welcome in America aren't going to be the people who are willingly and happily going to be handing over their Twitter handle.
But then they will automatically move into, as you and I both know, they'll automatically move into a different queue if they refuse to say who they are on social media, and they will attract necessarily increased suspicion about themselves if they do.
So that's the interesting thing. Let's remember, Twitter, in most accounts, is very, very open. What you say on Twitter, if you hide what you say on Twitter, no one's going to hear what you have to say. Most people on Twitter have a very open account, and they know that their comments are hitting the world if need be. You know, if we have hashtag Brexit, for example, everybody who's interested in talking about Brexit will be seeing that tweet that you've put out. The US authorities don't need to ask for your Twitter handle. They can easily find your Twitter handle.
Well, they can if you're on Twitter as Renata Sampson, or if you're on Twitter as George Galloway. But what if you're on Twitter as the Dark Knight Avenger?
But aren't we entitled to a private life? Let's forget about the Dark Knight Avenger. Let's say my Twitter handle is I love cats, for example, and all I tweet about is cats.
Yeah.
Isn't it okay for me to tweet about cats and not have to hand that information over?
Well, look, you're asking to go into the United States. So there's an issue immediately arises. I don't think you would dispute with me that the United States has the right to let anybody in or keep anybody out that they decide. They're a sovereign, independent country, an important power in the world. A lot of people attack them. They are entitled to decide that you can come in and you cannot come in. So if you accept that premise, then you are entitled to know who the person really is. And what they really are is often revealed on Twitter. It's often revealed.
You're right to an extent, apart from, I would argue, that quite a lot of people actually say things online that they wouldn't say, they don't really mean. People may adopt personalities, may choose to be more controversial than they actually mean to be, may be humorous. You know, that there is an element of, as soon as you have to reveal everything about yourself, you are potentially chilling the free speech, for example. So that's one argument. But also, let's not forget,
Renata, let me stop you there.
Renata,
let me stop you there.
Your fingerprint and your eye retina scan.
Yeah, Renata, but that only tells you what your eye retina looks like and what your fingerprint looks like. It doesn't tell you.
That's unique to you. Your fingerprint's more unique to you than your Twitter handle.
No, it isn't. Your Twitter account tells what you are really saying, not what you're writing on the form, but what you're really saying in the dark night. Now,
George, you must be the most honest man on Twitter ever.
Well,
I would argue that
book.
Lots of people aren't quite as honest as you.
Well, I'm an open book and have been for many decades. But there are lots of people, stalkers, extremists, who are on Twitter telling what they really think under false and assumed names. Now, if I was in charge of anybody border, if I was an American border guard or a British border guard, I want to know who that person who's trying to come in really is. And I'll find out more of who they really are, what they really think, what fantasies they really harbour, what kind of things they'd really like to do from their social media activity than I will from their retina.
My understanding is right now, when you fill in your request for a visa to go to the US, you have to say whether or not you've ever been involved in any terrorist activity, or worse to that effect. I may not be completely accurate.
Yeah, presumably nobody ever ticks yes.
To say yes.
Presumably nobody ever volunteers yes.
So that's the point. So,
but what have you been encouraging terrorism,
Renata?
About,
I love cats. Why would you think that it was important for the U.S. authorities to know that you love cats?
Well, it wouldn't be. They wouldn't spend two.
Interesting approach from the U.S.
They wouldn't spend 2 minutes.
I think it would be really helpful if the U.S. explained in a lot more detail about why and how they're going to use this information. I mean, don't forget, we are asked all the time to hand over information about ourselves, and most of the time we don't question it. Most of the times we don't ask why. I think more and more we're going to have companies, countries, whoever, say to us, we want this information and we're going to do X, Y, and Z with it. And then we'll say, okay, we can now make an informed judgment as to whether or not we're happy to hand over our Twitter handle or not. People live their lives on Facebook. If you hand over your Facebook account, you are also handing over all the data of all of your friends. Is that something your friends would be happy with, George?
Well, but
I'm not entirely sure it is.
There's two things, Renata. First of all, nobody has an automatic right to enter the United States, and neither should they. Neither should they.
No.
And secondly, you don't have to go to the United States. Many of us live perfectly full lives without going to the United States. It's up to us whether we want to go.
If you want to take your family to Disneyland, is it necessary
you can go to France.
Family's Facebook?
No, you can go to France.
you
can go to France, where it's much less of a tough gig to get in.
You know what? That's a good argument.
The point is, you don't have to go.
Or Japan.
Yeah, you don't have to go to the US, but if you go, you must comply with their conditions.
Well,
I mean, I don't think that's rocket science.
There's validity in what you say. You have to comply, of course. We have to hand over an awful lot of data already to enter a number of countries, not just America. I personally am just a little confused as to why the authorities need to be able to see who I'm friends with on Facebook and when I post photographs of a wedding that I'm at, or if I'm on Twitter and I'm saying that I've been to a concert or have been drunk at a party, or whatever it is that people tweet about. If I'm saying I love cats, I think there's probably
I'm
more
accurate to take this
ways.
Personally, this cats thing, Renata. No, listen to me. Listen to me.
I am listening to you, George.
I have myself 1 million followers on social media, and if you could see some of the kinds of people who are out there, the stalkers, the madmen, the potentially violent, the actually violent. I mean, the person who went to prison for 16 months for violently attacking me in the street had said that morning on Facebook that he wanted to cut my throat. Now, that kind of thing is out there and everywhere and about all kinds of people. Farage, the police are investigating hundreds of people on Twitter saying they wanted to stab, shoot, murder Nigel Farage. Why shouldn't the authorities take that kind of thing seriously?
But my argument back is do you really think that those people would be the people who would be inclined to hand over the data that they're being asked to give?
Well, in my case, yes.
I would argue that they're less likely to fill that form in and maybe provide the authorities with a fake account or another account that they hold. And this is the fundamental problem with what's being asked, is that I think that it's very easy to trick the system or to game the system. And that's why I'd be much more interested in understanding exactly what it is that the authorities are looking to do. There are a lot of unanswered questions about this request and about this news story. And hopefully over the next few weeks and months, we'll find out exactly what it is that they propose. But I think that there are ways that the people who they really want to go after will evade it. And the people who are just honest and good people will hand over information that will reveal and open up their lives when it's not really necessary for them to do so.
Renata, you're good. You're very good. Renata Sampson of Big Brother Watch, helping us through this rather vexed question. She and I disagreed, but I liked her style. Thanks very much, Renata, for joining us.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
Now we're talking about all kinds of things. The atrocity at Istanbul, the Big Brother watch objection to the new US rule that you're going to be asked who you are on social media if you are going to get a visa waiver. We're talking about the runners and riders in the Tory leadership election. Only the fox and the crab are at the starting line already, but the big elephants, Boris Johnson and Theresa May, if she doesn't mind me calling her that, she's not nearly as big as Boris Johnson in all kinds of ways. They are yet to enter the race, but of course are certain to do so, and there may even yet be others. And we're talking about the farce in the Labour Party, where we don't have anybody so far standing against Jeremy Corbyn, though the vast majority of the members of Parliament in Labour are openly and increasingly personally demanding that he go. I was asking, on the back of reports this evening, that a breakaway party as a fallback position is being planned by some or all of these rebels or renegades, according to your point of view, and I was asking what kind of names that they could have. Let me just look at some of those. The Tony Party, that's a good one. The Tony Party, Tony. No prizes for guessing who they mean there. Somebody says the Real Labour Party. Well, that is not a definition that I would accept. Tom Watson should stick to playing golf, says White Flag. That's a good one. Looking at Tom, I don't think he wastes many walks on the golf course. William McGuigan says, I'm from Govan, now in Chester. All is well. Enjoying the show with my daughter asking me about the issues. William, that's the big thing. This is the University of the Airwaves, and all views are welcome. 0844 499 1000, that's the number to call. Richard is in Crawley in Surrey. Richard, welcome.
Hi, George.
Hi, what would you like to say?
Hi. Well, wondering what you think about freedom of movement between the UK and Ireland. Do you think it should be maintained? Because that's got nothing to do with the EU, and that
no, that long predates the EU, and of course it should be maintained. Ireland is a special case. A special relationship exists between Britain and Ireland.
So I think we're pretty sure it will stay regardless of what happens in the negotiations.
Oh, I'm certain about that. The free movement between Britain and Ireland will be entirely unaffected by anything that happens in the Brexit negotiations. I'm absolutely certain about that. I've never come across a single person anywhere who has even thought, or even for a second has thought about changing that situation. So I don't think you've anything to worry about on that, Richard.
Well, obviously a lot of people have an Irish ancestry, and have been applying for Irish passports recently. In the last few days. Obviously, if you haven't got Irish ancestry, if free movement is still retained after Brexit and after everything...
It is, absolutely. The right to move. I myself am of Irish ancestry. I'm entitled to an Irish passport myself. And of course, whether you've got one or you don't, if you're Irish, come into the parlour. You can come here anytime you like. You can work here. You can vote here. You can exercise all rights here if you're Irish. Quite different to even other members of the European community.
I mean, my plan now is to move there, in the next few weeks and live there. I haven't got ancestry, so I have to live there for 5 years to get it. And then I'll get, be able to get an Irish passport then. And then I will then renounce my British citizenship then, because I no longer feel English or British. I'm born and bred in England. So I feel the country has left me. So that's basically my plan.
Well, the best of luck with it, Richard. You're going to a very green and pleasant land indeed. Let's hear from Ollie in London. Ollie?
Hello, George.
Yes, hello, Ollie. How are you doing, sir?
Good. I was going to talk about Jeremy Corbyn and Labour. I think I have a solution for a negotiated settlement. How about Jeremy becomes kind of like, he remains the leader of the party at large, but not the leader of the opposition, in the sense that he has sort of a policy role. He becomes like a grandee, kind of like a Brown to Blair or like a John Prescott used to be, someone, because if you think about it.
Why would he do that when he's been elected by a landslide 9 months ago to be the actual leader?
Say what you want about Jeremy Corbyn. He doesn't have the skills to be an effective leader of opposition.
Well, someone should stand against him then and see if the members agree with that.
Yeah, but he has the backing of the members, and I understand they want the party to move towards the left. And yes, you have to keep those principles and those policies, but then from a day-to-day operational point of view, do you really think Jeremy Corbyn has sort of the fire? Is he enough of a firebrand to lead
My
Labour?
goodness, they're trying to get rid of him because they think he's too much of a firebrand.
No, he's a firebrand in terms of his policy, but then you know how the media spin works, how it's hard for someone who has enough.
Well, but they would do that to anybody. They did that to Gordon Brown. They did that to Ed Miliband. They're doing it to Jeremy Corbyn. They'll do it to Tom Watson or Angela Eagle. You've just got to get over that.
Jeremy, but then if you have a leader who's strong enough, who's able to sort of counteract that, I think Jeremy's made a lot of tactical errors during his time already. You just have to admit that.
No, I don't admit it. You tell me what they are.
Making certain statements, or for example, when he says, "It's a tragedy. What happened to Osama bin Laden?"
He didn't say that. That's a complete distortion.
I don't know, but whatever he said.
I'll tell you what, Ollie. Ollie, instead of getting out more, you need to stay in more and start reading more and start searching more. Because what you just said there is such a canard. It's such a falsehood.
I apologize if that was wrong. I didn't realize that. But generally, I think we need someone who has more fire in their belly to lead.
You couldn't get more fire. No, Ollie, you couldn't get more fire. They're trying to get rid of him because he's got too much fire.
You would be a better leader.
I would be a better leader, but I'm not in the Labour Party, and so I can't be.
Well, we need someone of that ilk. Jeremy is just too meek and mild to the party.
Not at all. He's a fine man. I'll tell you what he is, Ollie. He's a good and honest man. Now, have we really reached the stage where a good and honest man is not what we want?
Well, that's not the world we're living. That's not the media world we're living in.
So what do we want? A bad and mendacious man?
No, I want someone who's aggressive enough, who's going to be a good leader, who's going to be able to have authority and be able to stamp his authority on the party and look back on
I'll
the
tell you
great
what. Have you, Ollie? Have you seen the seething mass of self-entitlement of the 172 Labour MPs that are against them? I'll tell you, stamping.
None of them.
You'd need size 55s to stamp your authority on them.
I agree. They're all self-serving from day one. They've never given him the light of day. It's ironic now they're saying that he's failing when they never really gave him a chance in the first place. But we are where we are, and Jeremy has to find a way out of it.
No, the party has to find a way out. Ollie, it's been a pleasure to disagree with you. Thanks very much for calling me. Rhiannon says on Twitter, good to hear George Galloway sticking up for Jeremy Corbyn on talk radio, calling him a good and honest man. And hashtags keep Corbyn, hashtag solidarity. And Ali says, Jeremy Corbyn for PM, keep your promises and your belief and people will follow you. Zahir says, presumably of the rebels, are they still around? I thought they'd vanished off the face of the earth. And David says, what is Nicola Sturgeon trying to do? Is she aiming for another Scottish referendum? Is the Pope a Catholic? David? Here's Tom in Gloucestershire coming up next. Go ahead, Tom.
Hiya, George. I just thought I'd speak up for Jeremy Corbyn tonight. What a state our politics is in.
Oh, it's amazing,
what the Labour Party is doing this very evening is almost like what the Tories tend to do to their leaders. It's totally wrong and totally out of order. He's got a democratic mandate. He's only been in the job 9 months. And, I mean, if he'd done something fundamentally wrong or something corrupt or something like that, they've got every right then to get rid of him, but he hasn't. And I think it's just because they don't like him, they don't think he's He's pretty enough for the cameras.
They never liked him, Tom. They never gave him a chance.
And I tell you what, today that was a particularly low moment for David Cameron, as far as I'm concerned, because, you know, it was almost like kicking a wounded animal today. It was an easy hit for David Cameron to sort of go in and tell him to go. It was the old Bullingdon boy resurfacing again, I'm afraid. And,
yes,
Jeremy.
But things often backfire, don't they? I mean, if the leader of the Tory party tells the leader of the Labour Party he must resign, how does that make his own members, Corbyn's own members, look that the Prime Minister, David Cameron, is on their side?
Precisely. But, I mean, Jeremy Corbyn was very chivalrous to him on Monday when he did his statement.
Yeah.
I mean, he wished him well, he wished his family well, and that's what he gets in return. But Jeremy Corbyn is trying to make the Labour Party relevant again. Under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, basically all the policies were formulated around the coffee table at number 10 and number 11, including the Iraq War. It's a democratic movement made up of members, MPs, union people, and the conference should stand for something. Now, these people who've got their big issues with Jeremy Corbyn and ideas, most of them probably from the right of the party, should put that to conference and see if they can get their way in the party and democratically arrive at a decision. But as it is, I think they want to go back to the old Blair way of doing things, and I'm afraid that doesn't wash with a lot of the general public. And, I mean, he's showing more courage tonight than any of those traitors that have stabbed him in the back. And, I mean, they all say he's a good and honourable man. Well, surely that's the very type of people that we should have leading parties in this country.
They say that he's a good and principled man, but they prefer a bad and unprincipled one. That's the truth of it. Tom, pleasure to talk to you. 0844 499 1000. That's the number to call if you want to join in this discussion. I'm looking to try and get up some more text, but the technology is defeating me. Maybe someone behind the glass will. In the old days, we used to cut down a forest of trees every week. People would bring me through a huge pile of printed paper with all the texts and emails on it. I appreciate it was environmentally dreadful, but it was very, very easy for the presenter. And I used to take them all home with me, and I've still got, believe it or not, a gigantic mountain of texts and emails that I used to get on the radio. But we've moved on. It's a paperless office, more or less, but I need some help. Andy Peacock says, Mandy, I have contacts. We could use your skills. Campbell, I know everything about you. And Sparkle says, perhaps the theme tune of the new Labour could be Mac the Knife. Yes, that's a good one. How about the Pissed Off Party, says Neil in the Wirral. Even Attlee would have been expelled as a trot by these Blairites, says P. McCabe. And there's much, much more where that came from. This has gone from tragedy, though, to farce. The dames in the pantomime over the last 24 hours, Dame Margaret Hodge, a billionaire, Dame Tessa Jowell, a multimillionaire, Dame Harriet Harman, and Dame David Cameron. All the dames were out to get Corbyn yesterday and today. And it really has become a pantomime. Because if this was a coup worthy of the name, then this would all be all but over by now. A candidate, an agreed, united candidate of substance, would already be in the field against Jeremy Corbyn. But that's not the situation. So this was not properly planned. This was a spontaneous coup. Otherwise, they'd have a candidate. But they don't. They have all knifed their leader, and some of them in the most lurid and personal way, including his own deputy leader. But then there's nobody to run against him. And the woman who was going to run against him has still not decided to do so and has gone home, presumably still in tears. And she's going to tell us tomorrow. But she is opposed by her own constituency members in overwhelming numbers who are demanding that she shows some loyalty to the elected leader. So she might end up running for leader, losing, and then being deselected. Where's this all going to end? I tell you, it seems to me ineluctable that it's going to end in organic division. And I think that that is probably the best thing. Patricia says, Corbyn's never weak. He's possibly the strongest man I know to withstand such attacks from the Parliamentary Labour Party. James Ball says, Corbyn is teaching the spineless traitors that integrity is and honesty count more than self-entitlement and status. Oliver West says the media won't let a good, honest man survive. We need a firebrand Jeremy as party grandee, but not opposition leader. That's Ollie, who was on the line earlier, I think. And Sunny D says, how about the United European Fascist Superstate Federal Party, UEFSP? Oh, dear. Oh, dear, dear, dear. Can we take this call? Have we got time? Let's go to Michael in London on Corbyn. Michael, welcome.
Hi, George. It's great to hear you back. I used to listen to you on Talk Sport all the time.
Thanks, Michael. I enjoyed it very much, and I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, I was about 14 or 15 at the time. You really got me interested in politics.
A lot of people say that to me, you know. It really was quite a cult radio show. I hope we can build it back up.
But anyway, what I find really extraordinary about this is, like, how many times have you watched the shows like Question Time or the Daily Politics or other news programs where they invite MPs, and you always hear them saying there's a real disconnect between the people and the political class, or people have just completely lost trust of the political class. And we finally got someone like Jeremy Corbyn, who people trust no matter what side of the political spectrum they're on.
Yeah.
And they're all knifing him in the back.
In the back, in the side, in the front. I mean, never has a man been subjected to such treatment from his own side. At Prime Minister's statement the other day, on Monday, I think, there were Labour members of Parliament actually heckling their own leader as he questioned the Prime Minister.
Wasn't that disgraceful?
I've never seen anything like it.
I mean, even if you did want to get rid of him, at least show him a bit of respect.
Well, show the Parliament a bit of respect. Show their party members a bit of respect. It's really the most revolting revolt I've ever seen. Michael, keep listening and spread the word that the mother of all talk shows is back, will you?
Absolutely.
Many thanks to you. I'm going to take a break, then I'm going to talk about this Turkish story.
Call me have a go if you think you're hard enough. Get it? The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
Okay, breaking news. Angela Eagle, who said she'd tell us tomorrow, has obviously been listening to this show because she just told us tonight she is running for leader against Jeremy Corbyn. So the stage is set. Let battle commence. I believe, and I'm saying it here, without a trace of equivocation, that Jeremy Corbyn will win a huge victory against Angela Eagle, and that the revolting revolt that these members of Parliament have staged will not profit them. Indeed, the anger of Labour members against them can only mount. I've got the stuff here now. Angela Eagle is believed to have the support of the 51 MEPs and MPs that are needed to mount the challenge, and it's off and running. She's one of the 20 members of the Shadow Cabinet that quit this week. She is an unusual politician. I don't know her well, but I did sit in Parliament with her. She was quite junior then. She would be the first lesbian woman to lead a major British political party. If she was elected, she'd be the first lesbian Prime Minister, at least openly so. And all of that will, I'm sure, be interesting to the public. But the most important thing about her, from my point of view, is that she has behaved in such a disloyal way, such an anti-democratic way, that if she were to prosper, if Jeremy Corbyn were to be defeated by her, the party would surely divide in two. And maybe it will anyway. Now, I started out the show talking about the atrocity carried out at the Ataturk airport in Istanbul. 41 dead, hundreds of people wounded, a large number of them in intensive care. And I've been looking for a Turkish voice to interview about it, and I found a good one. Dr. Ahmet Kanverdi has a PhD in international relations, and he's a newspaper columnist for the London-based Turkish Haber newspaper. Dr. Ahmet, first of all, my condolences to you and all the people of Turkey for this great atrocity. What can you tell us about it, where it came from, who might have done it, and why this is happening?
Thank you, George. We didn't meet personally, but I know you very well. Actually, I even wrote one article about you in the past when you first elected. Thank you for your concern as well. As you know, in the Middle East, so many things is going on, and this latest atrocity which happened yesterday, sadly, so many innocent people from so many different nationalities killed. But this is not an action of one night or one day. It didn't happen suddenly. It's a terrorist act. Everyone has to condemn it. But unfortunately, it is a production of long-term policies that is going on for ages now in the Middle East. You can start it from invasion of Afghanistan, Iraq, what is going in Syria, and Turkish government policies, etc., etc. These obviously, it is a production of these policies, but it doesn't give any excuse to anyone in terms of condemning it.
No, of course. The primary responsibility lies with the murderers themselves, but only a fool would seek to separate the act of murder from the conditions which produced it, because otherwise we'll not ever be able to solve it. I took the view at the beginning of the show that the innocent Turkish people, not just in this atrocity, but in all the recent atrocities, are paying a blood price for a policy that the Turkish government itself is responsible for, of helping to build the monster of Islamist extremism, ISIS, Al-Qaeda in Syria, and so on. Do you take that view yourself, or do you take a different one?
Well, I partly agree with you. Turkish government must be held responsible for this act, because from day one, their policies is unfortunately mothered these horrible Middle Ages organization, I call them. I don't want to call them even any kind of relations with Islam or Muslim world. I call them Middle Ages organization, because in mentality, in spirituality, and in philosophy, they are no different than horrible Middle Ages acts. They have no knowledge, no soul, nothing whatsoever in human spirituality that you can describe. However, these organizations were mothered by Turkey and its allies. This is a fact.
Including us in Britain.
That's where I was coming from. When I said Turkey and its allies, that is, we cannot differentiate ourselves as British citizen in England, our government acting on our behalf with our votes, going and bombing or any kind of policy carrying out in the Middle East that encourages this kind of organization. What if you go to the mother of the problem, it goes back to the invasion of Iraq, and which, as we know, the coalition, which is called so-called international coalition, led by America. When you say that, many people might, despite what we are saying, they might not like what we are saying, what I am saying, but I've been writing about this and I made it very clearly. Yes, this organization, monstrous, horrible, despicable, terrorist organizations. These people are firstly responsible for their act. They are killing innocent people, no matter whatsoever they are doing.
Yeah.
However, who brought them into the scene? For example, everyone is talking about ISIS. Who are ISIS? Where they were 10 years ago, where they were 5 years ago, where they were before. These organizations, they will not exist.
No. Even President Obama has acknowledged that this phenomenon has come out of the invasion of Iraq. So it's no longer controversial, your view and my view on this. But let me ask you something. Maybe like you, probably unlike you. I once admired Erdogan. I thought that for a time his policy of no quarrels with the neighbors, of a peace process with the Kurdish people, of modernizing Islamic approach to the economy, which was reaping rich rewards in economic growth and so on. I thought he was a kind of model for the Islamic world, since which absolutely everything has gone wrong. His government is at war with the Kurdish people. It has facilitated the rise of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. It's at war with Syria. It's shooting down Russian aeroplanes that are trying to destroy ISIS. It is on very bad terms with the government in Baghdad. It has worsened its relations over Cyprus and Greece and so on. It's all gone wrong, Doctor. Do you see it that way?
Well, unfortunately, I do agree with you. I wish it wasn't the other way. But however, when this government came to the power, particularly in terms of the last prime minister, they had a policy which they said, peace with everyone in the region, peace with every neighbor. And what they came, there is no government in the region that in peace with Turkey. They created some sort of environment, political environment, that made every single country in the region is enemy to Turkey now.
Yeah.
The reason for that, exactly what the government was initiating. They started to overlook the other countries. They started to be like, we are the model, we are the highest, we are the better, you need to follow us. As a president, as a prime minister, as a representing a country, you cannot go to the other country and dictate what you want. Once you do that, there is no difference between you or America or any other imperialist country. And that's where the mistake was happened. Regarding the Kurdish people in the region, in Turkey and in Syria, unfortunately, the government never had a clear policy towards them. They were just working as if on daily basis. The whole point was winning the election. It wasn't, because we are all as an insider, I didn't see it the way you saw it. I never said, what a nice guy, he is making a peace, he's going to establish the peace, he's going to do that. But I actually, as a columnist also, I wrote in the past, I said, this is a temporary strategy by Erdogan to win the election. The day the Kurdish leaders in Turkey, they said they will never let him become a president. As you know, he's
now an executive president. Yeah,
executive president. He is not a president. As the day they said that, the deal is finished.
Well, you were right and I was wrong, and I acknowledge that, and I deeply regret it. What's going to happen now? I mean, he's taken more and more power unto himself, and he's winning elections, whether fairly or unfairly. I mean, what's he going to crown himself next? The Sultan?
Well, God knows where it is going to go, but you don't need to crown yourself or name yourself as a sultan or king.
You can act like one.
Exactly. What you are acting even worse than a king or sultan. I, as an political scientist, I never seen in Turkish history such an different, unexpected, unpredicted model of administration.
Well, look, Doctor, we're going to have to continue this on another night. I really would like to meet you, and I'm most impressed by what you've told us this evening. But time waits for no man.
Talk Radio.
It's the mother of all talk shows, with me, George Galloway, on the busiest news week in a very, very long time. You can call me 0844 499 1000. Do it now.
Across the UK, online and on DAB.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio, we'll get you talking.
Listener comrades of the world, unite! He's a weapon of mass discussion, and he's back on your radio.
Get ready for a revolutionary rumble on your radio with the original George of the political jungle.
Galloway, celebrate the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway. Call me, have a go if you think you're hard enough. Get it? On the radio station that gives power to the people.
Talk Radio, we'll get you talking.
Well, you can talk if you like on 0844 499 1000. That's the number to call me on. We'll call you right back. We're talking about Turkey. We're talking about Labour. We're talking about the Tories. We're talking about the Liberal Democrats. We're talking also with Tim Ledwith from UNICEF in New York City on the latest child poverty report. There's an hour to go, although I'll be back on Friday night and every Friday night, God willing, between 7 and 10. It's George Galloway. It's the mother of all talk shows on Talk Radio.
Georgie Galloway's back on the radio. Galloway, celebrate. The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway
on Talk Radio.
Now, it's not rocket science that poor children are twice as likely to die before the age of 5, or that poor girls are more than twice as likely to become child brides. But what it is a wake-up call. If anyone was awake, I'll be surprised, because many people in this country believed the hype about millennial goals and making poverty history, and how we marched and how we fundraised and how debt was forgiven and how Gordon Brown and Bono saved the world. Well, it turns out that the lot of the poorest people in the world, and particularly the poorest children in the world, is not a very great deal better, if at all, than it was when we thought or were told that this problem had been solved. In New York City is Tim Ledwith, one of the authors, editors of this important new report from the estimable organization that is UNICEF, part, of course, of the United Nations. It makes pretty grim reading, Tim, doesn't it?
I suppose it does, and it's certainly, if you're looking forward at the kind of projections that the evidence shows the world will see based on current trends. As you said, the fact that between now and 2030, if we don't do something drastically different, we'll see 70 million children under the age of 5 dying from preventable causes.
That's like more than the whole population of Britain. Imagine everybody in Britain dying needlessly.
Absolutely.
It's stunning. It's a mountain of dead children.
It certainly is. I think someone said it's a couple of jumbo jets of children a day, if you want to look at it that way. But it's not an inevitable scenario. I mean, that's the flip side of what the report is trying to get across. It's really, a turning point and a decision point for the world at this juncture. There were pledges made last year with the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals that we will leave no one behind, and that's really the key to that's the essence of this report. There actually was progress under the Millennium Development Goals during that period and before. We saw mortality among children under the age of 5 cut by more than half between 1990 and 2015. We saw the number of maternal deaths decreasing by more than 40% in that same period, and other improvements, in terms of immunization coverage and other preventable illnesses among children, and some improvement in the education front. But what happened was, if we look at the progress that was made, it's overall in the aggregate. We're looking at the averages, and what we need to do now is go beyond the averages and really reach the children who have been left behind. And they've been left behind for completely arbitrary reasons, including, of course, poverty, location, children in remote areas or in urban slums, but also things like gender, ethnicity, religion, disability. These are the children who we have not reached with the overall progress that was made during the MDG period. And that's really what we're saying, is we need to focus now on keeping overall progress moving, but really reaching the children who have been left behind.
How realistic is it, though, that will change? I've got to tell you that I used to be in your kind of business in the early and mid-1980s. I saw the famine at close quarters in sub-Saharan Africa and so on. And I have all my life been presented with goals and striven for them. But fundamentally, the world is as ill-divided between rich and poor countries and rich and poor people in all countries, as it was back then and back always.
True enough. But we also have seen that there is evidence that there are, approaches that work. There's a series of recommendations that are part of the report, which are based on really proven approaches that UNICEF and many of our partners have taken. We certainly are facing a very divided world. There's no question about that. But what we're saying is that, if these goals mean anything, we have to narrow the gaps. Otherwise, there is no such thing as sustainable development. By definition, if you don't reach the children and families who are the most marginalized, you will never achieve any goals that are, however lofty they may be on paper. We also do cite some evidence, including a study by a group of development agencies, including UNICEF, that showed a 2% increase in investment for the children left behind in interventions in basic health, nutrition, water and sanitation, and education, would pretty much wipe out that entire bleak picture of under 5 mortality between now and 2035. $30 billion a year, which in the overall scheme of things is not a lot of money, but it has to be accompanied by a commitment to reaching the most marginalized children and to using really, innovative approaches. There's a lot of, mobile technology and other new developments make it possible to have a two-way conversation with people who are marginalized, to really get them involved in making decisions about their own lives and their children's lives. The only way that we can make any kind of progress in the long term is to break this intergenerational cycle of poverty. In terms of how realistic it is, it's a necessity if we want to have. There are actually, besides the moral imperative, there are some real economic and social benefits to this kind of investment.
Now, you mentioned the specificities within this, and I was particularly taken by the reference to the special oppression of girls by poverty. Tell us a bit about what you found on that.
Absolutely. There has been some progress in closing the gender gap in education, but it's still not sufficient. And in fact, there's been a kind of a stalling on that front over the past few years. But we do know that girls, in particular, when they do have access to education, they have vastly improved prospects in their own lives. They have greater income. They have fewer children and have children later in life. They're less susceptible to abuse and exploitation and child marriage. And we also see that their children will have the knock-on effect of improved immunization coverage, more education, and more of a prospect at a fair chance in life. So it's something that affects not only the current generation of children, but really goes, to future generations. There's no question. One of the projections that we have in the report, if we don't change the way we're operating, if we continue with business as usual, by 2030, there will be some 750 million women who will have been married as children. That's
a staggering number.
It is.
Well, look, I can say, though you probably can't.
Tremendous risks associated.
Yeah,
with that.
Of course.
Sorry.
I can say, though probably you can't. Certainly you can't in the way that I say. The truth is, there's more than enough wealth in the world to resolve these problems. The problem is that wealth is concentrated in fewer and fewer hands, and money that could solve many, if not all, of these problems is wasted on weapons and war. And if we were to allocate even a fraction of that which we spend on weapons and war to making war on poverty, we'd have a very, very different world than the one that you paint there.
No question. I guess, you have to look at it in a couple of different ways. I mean, in terms of resources, right? Is it acceptable to carry on in a situation where the poorest children are almost twice as likely to die before their 50th birthday as children from the more affluent households, more advantaged households, or where girls from the poorest households are twice as likely to be married as those from wealthier households as children? There are choices to be made, and that's really what we're saying at this point. There are decisions to be made, and of course it's an uphill battle. There's no question about that. But what we say is, and I think is true, is that this is right in principle, but it's also right in practice. It's a moral imperative, but it's also it also has sort of a strategic aspect to it in terms of future stability, future productivity in nations around the world. There are real tangible benefits to a small amount of investment now that will have a huge impact later. And in terms of war and conflict, there's a very strong case to be made that when children have a fair chance to survive in their early childhood and into adolescence and then thrive with decent educational opportunities, you're going to have more peaceful and stable societies. You're going to cut down on conflict. So I think we can make that argument, and I think that we have to continue making it despite the huge obstacles that we do face.
Tim, you make a very powerful case. Thank you very much for joining us on Talk Radio. That was Tim Ledwith from UNICEF in New York City in the wake of a new UNICEF report that sketches just how divided a world we are, and not just on the obvious bases, but on the question of wealth and so on. Let's look at a couple of the tweets. Jay Rydell says, "You're confusing showing emotion as the same as being unelectable as Prime Minister. Fail. Weak." I think he's referring to my reference to Angela Eagle weeping on camera and so on. Maybe that's a fair point, Mr. or Ms. Rydell. But I do think it's not a good look. Prime Ministers, nuclear buttons and all that. I think we look for a bit more metal. Now, let's see. The other Harry Cole says she's so decisive, she couldn't even make up her mind when she was going to tell us when she was going to make up her mind. That's a fair point. Aka says it's all about arrogance and loss of control. Corbyn was elected for the people, by the people, and the plotters weren't. Ian in Hertfordshire sends a message. George, great to hear you on the wireless. Thanks, Ian. And somebody called Che Guevara II says, Labour need you back, Gigi. There's a lot of people write that to me, and I'm grateful for their good wishes that I presume are implied in it. Maybe they want me to go back to Labour so I can be miserable, like Jeremy Corbyn has had to be miserable over this last few days. But I assume that almost all the people who say that mean it in my best interests and in Labour's best interests. There's only one way I can be back in the Labour Party, and that is if they use the opportunity of the Chilcot report next week to rescind my expulsion, which was unjust, unjustifiable, was scarcely even attempted to be justified at the time, and was carried through on the orders of Tony Blair. The late Michael Foot, the late Tony Benn were my character witnesses. Mr. Corbyn was outside, literally outside in the street, demonstrating against my expulsion as it was happening. There was no case for my expulsion at the time, and now that we know what we know, I was right about Iraq, and Tony Blair was wrong. So I'm not going to go cap in hand to a Labour committee somewhere that might slam the door in my face in any case and say, please, sir, can I come back into the Labour Party? They have to conclude that I, and presumably some others, were unjustly expelled, and we were right to oppose the Iraq war, and we were unjustly expelled, and that's the only way that it can happen. And if it happened, I would ipso facto automatically be back as a member of, as it happens, the Labour Party in Scotland, and it would be as if my expulsion had never happened. That's the only way that that can happen. Okay, last 43 minutes or so after this. Still flooded with tweets especially. Stephen B. says, it seems not many doubt Corbyn's goodness and honesty. Rather, it is a lack of faith in his parliamentary electability. That's from Stephen B. Well, Stephen, that would be a point if his opponent was evidently more electable. But I've got to tell you, with as much respect as I can muster, and in all honesty, Angela Eagle is not that person. There is nothing about Angela Eagle that makes her more electable than Jeremy Corbyn, and there are many things that make her less electable. She supported the Iraq war, for God's sake, and next week the Chilcot inquiry is going to slaughter the Iraq war and those responsible for it. But she voted for it. She voted for it, and she voted against the establishment of an Iraq war inquiry regularly. She supports the renewal of the Trident nuclear missile program that Jeremy Corbyn opposes. She supported austerity. She abstained on welfare cuts. I could go on, believe me, Stephen. And then there's the matter of her polish, her performance. You see, you could get away with a dodgy voting record if you were a dazzler in the TV studios, on the platform, on the floor of the House. Stephen, Angela Eagle is no dazzler. Let's hear from a man that I used to have on the show regularly. Then he was a little-known Tory backbencher. And then, maybe thanks to his regular appearances on my TalkSport show, he went all the way to the top as chairman of the Conservative Party. And I'm glad he's back on now. On Talk Radio. Grant, thanks for joining us.
Hello, George. How are you?
I'm good. Good to hear your voice again. Who are you backing, Grant?
Well, I haven't actually announced yet, but I think I'm more in a sort of position to sort of think about the kind of leadership that's required rather than the actual name. And I'll tell you about that if it's helpful.
Yes, please.
Oh, well, look, first of all, that was an outcome that the establishment did not expect in any way, shape or form.
Yep.
I did actually vote Remain, but I was very torn on the issue because, I think that Europe had got too big and bossy and was frustrating a lot of people. It used to drive me mad as a minister. Oftentimes you'd be given a decision by the civil servants, and at the bottom they write in small lettering, you don't really have a choice here, Minister. You've got to say yes, otherwise the EU will start infraction proceedings. They'll take us to court if you don't say yes. And you do think, well, what's the point of having ministers of the crown if you're going to be taken to court over making your own decisions? So I was in two minds. But on the other hand, big hassle getting out of it. We get the free trade. We get all the benefits that come with that. And so I was torn. But I did, in the end, decide to back Remain, and that's how I voted. And then we get.
Do you think that'll turn out to have been bad for your career, Grant?
Well, I think it's given the outcome. It's like taking a big deck of cards and throwing them all up in the air. Who knows how that all will end? But let's just off my career and back onto the problem Britain faces.
But I have a paternal or a avuncular concern for your career.
Which you've established over many years, and obviously I'm enormously appreciative. It worked the first time round, as you say.
Yeah.
But where does it leave Britain? Well, my view is this. Right, we've known for decades now, roughly which direction we're going in. We're within this big European family. You could have prime ministers of varying ability and quality, but we'd still probably much rock on in the same direction. I think all of that has changed last Thursday because we're outside of the EU. We literally have to take our country and redescribe its place in the world, its direction, what we're going to achieve, how we're going to pay for ourselves and our place in the world in future. And I think my view is we should be attempting to turn Britain into the world's greatest trading nation. So we're an island. In the 19th century, we squashbuckling ability to trade all around the world, and I think we have to renew that. And I think that's doable. And people will say, well, haven't you just turned your back on the biggest trading bloc in the world? Well, yes, we have, and that was the outcome of the vote. But actually, interestingly, I was having a look at this, George. It turns out that only about 66% of our trade was covered by free trade agreements, which is actually on the low side. Norway, they have about 80%. I saw that, I think it's Australia, 77%. Canada, similarly so. So actually, outside of the EU, if we, get our skates on, we can actually set up a lot more free trade agreements than we've actually had within the EU. And if we start with that kind of grand plan, I think we will be in the right direction to kind of create an economy that we will all want to see succeed.
That kind of points in, I'm not pressing you on who you're going to support, but it kind of points to a Brexiteer as the next Tory leader, doesn't it? Don't you think it would be a bit difficult for someone who supported Remain to now become the Tory leader, because they'd be open to the suggestion or accusation, as it would be, from Mr. Farage and UKIP and so on, that they were selling the pass?
Do you know what, actually? I think you might have me on in a year's time and say how wrong I was. But I think, whether you were, a Brexiteer or a Remainer, unless you were one of the key people, I'm talking literally like, Osborne and David Cameron, unless you were them, I don't think it's going to hugely impact on who people support. I do think this, though. I think the kind of notion that we can somehow just brush this whole thing under the carpet. I get a lot of emails actually from constituents in my Welland Hatfield constituency saying things like, oh, this is all a terrible mistake. You guys in Parliament are elected. Parliament is sovereign. Can't you just ignore the whole thing, maybe tweak it a bit, call a second referendum? And I say, look, I voted Remain, but you can't do that. You can't just ignore the will of the people in a completely democratic...
No, and by the way, Grant, although some Tory MPs have forgotten this, you were elected on a manifesto to have a binding referendum on whether or not to leave the European Union.
And
so
what's more...
You would be breaking a solemn and binding pledge.
Absolutely right. And what's more, nearly the whole of Parliament, with the exception, I think, of the SNP and literally one or two others, voted for that referendum. So the referendum has complete legitimacy. And this nonsense of, oh, I didn't like the way that this side fought it, or that side lied about it. Well, you know what? Yeah, it is actually all of our responsibilities to fact check what you're being told, to get to the bottom of it. Guess what? Some of these politicians spin stuff. Who knew? I've got. So this referendum not only is in my view is final. It also, even as I say, even though I was actually on the losing side, I also think it absolutely has to be enacted. So the only kind of candidate that I think is out of the question is somebody who sort of says, oh, my objective is to fudge this and forget about it and brush it under the carpet. We cannot do that. That would be letting down the electorate.
That would be Jeremy Hunt then.
Well, yeah, and Jeremy's great, great pal of mine, and I like what he stands for in every other regard, but I just don't think we can now say to people, oh, you didn't really mean that, did you? Don't worry, we'll find a way around it.
We'll find a way of walking it back, as John Kerry put it.
Walking it back, that's right. And that's you can't do that. What you've got to do now, you've got to say, right, this is what the people have ordered, and actually give the man his due respect. David Cameron, immediately came out and said, I get that, it's final, and therefore I can't be the person to lead this forward. But you asked the question, could it be a non-leaver leading party? Yeah, probably, because, actually I was at this all sounds rather Byzantine, but the 1922 committee, you all know all about it.
Yeah.
This is the backbench committee that organises things like Conservative leadership contests, and I was there at 5 o'clock today. The contest for the Conservative leadership kicked off. I've got to say, in contrast to what's happening across the House, I don't make this as a political point at all, but just as an observation, it was completely smooth. Everyone agreed on the rules, which are the same rules as last time. We vote for we vote until we're down to 2 candidates. We then send those out to the membership in the country. That's how we choose our leader. But the point is, I detected that everyone has a keenness to select a new leader, whether they were a leaver or they were a remainer. I don't think will be, after they're selected, the most critical thing. I suspect everyone will rally round them, and as long as that person is enacting the will of the people, which is, as I say, they have asked us to leave the EU. That's the point. We have to now follow their orders.
Grant, it's a pleasure talking to you again. Don't be a stranger. Keep coming back. Thanks very much indeed. Grant Shapps, now one of the leading figures in the Conservative Party. He was a rather junior backbencher when he started coming on the mother of all talk shows. Other politicians, please note.
He's a weapon of mass discussion, and he's back on your radio. The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway
on Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
The paper review on Talk Radio with Metro. Grab your free copy tomorrow morning.
Well, I've enjoyed my chats this week with Chris Cowley, the assistant editor of Metro. I'm a reader. I pick it up every day. And so it's good to have a chance to talk to him about what's in tomorrow's paper. Chris, welcome.
Hello, George.
Now, is there any change in your front, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth? Or is it still full of the things that my show has been full of?
Well, we've decided to change it tomorrow because of the horrors in Istanbul at the Ataturk airport. We've got a couple of pictures in today of the actual bomber just striding into the airport. And
strikingly similar to the Brussels attack, yeah? They even got a taxi to the gig.
Yes, and
then slaughtered all these people.
Terrible, absolutely awful. I mean, he was wearing a padded jacket on a very warm night, and you'd think somebody might have thought, well, hang on a minute, that looks a bit odd. But anyway, so we have changed things for tomorrow because the human story and the human cost of this disastrous
gigantic death toll and wounded toll, and a lot of international citizens also murdered, and Turkey has had one after another of these atrocities.
It has, and but it could happen in any airport, as the president there is saying. It could happen anywhere at any time, and we just got to be vigilant wherever we go.
Well, I'm glad you're doing that, Chris, because I had the distinct impression that because it happened in Turkey rather than closer to home, journalists were not giving it the attention it deserved. So well done you. What else have you got?
Well, we've gone to Wimbledon, obviously, and Wimbledon's on, and don't we love a sort of fairy tale story? And Marcus Willis, 772nd in the world, playing Federer on centre court, number 3 in the world, and he was getting cheered on even in the warm-up, but he got absolutely slaughtered, I'm afraid. But I think everybody knew that. But he had his day, which was great fun in many respects. And there was never going to be any other outcome than a Federer win. But it was just brilliant, sort of stoically British, I suppose, that we all cheered him on nonetheless.
Yeah,
and he's got an army of
do.
followers. He's got a sort of, they call themselves the Berkshire Bulldogs, and they sort of start chanting sort of "shoes off if you love Willis," which I'm told is an old football song, but we still can't quite work it out.
It's older than me, because I've never heard it. But was the weather kind? I was indoors all day. I mean, was Wimbledon affected by the rain?
Oh, seriously, yes. All the outside courts were badly affected, but of course, centre court being having the roof on, etc. They can get away with it these days. So centre court was fine. I think court number 1 similarly. But then certainly it was a bit of a washout in the outside courts.
And how much more Wimbledon have we got? Has it just started? Forgive me, I've been rather preoccupied with other things.
Well, it has started, and we've there's this week and next week. So I mean, it's
plenty more tennis.
We love tennis.
And are you expecting that the British will do anything?
Well, we're hoping a Scotsman will do it for us, of course.
I thought you might mention that. So you've got Turkey, which is a huge story, as I say, a little underreported in my view, because partly of all these British stories. Where are you standing on the Corbyn election? We now know there's going to be one. It's Corbyn versus Angela Eagle. Have you given that a good show?
Well, we've got another spread on politics tomorrow. It's all about Brexit. It's all about the Tories. It's all about Corbyn, and it's just not going to go away. So we're still covering it as much as we can. I mean, obviously the Tory leadership contest the nominations will close at midday tomorrow. Yeah. And we've got the Corbyn situation as well. So, I mean, people are clamouring for him to go. It's just going to carry on and on.
Yeah, I mean, these elections are not quick things, are they? I mean, when is the Labour contest finish, and when does the Tory contest finish?
I'm not altogether certain about that, George. It just seems to be going on and on. And
I think we're talking September in both cases. I just don't know which date.
I think, well, they keep changing. I heard yesterday, certainly on the Tories front, they were putting it back a bit further into September. Yeah. So I'm not sure where the Labour situation sits.
It's going to be a long, hot summer on the political front. What about, I mentioned this with some trepidation as a Scotsman, what about the disaster against the supermarket team Iceland?
Well, I think we've fast becoming forgetting that now. Although,
oh, really? You moved on.
We have to move. We have to move on. And tomorrow, on Friday, I think it's Wales, isn't it? So I think a lot of us will cheer on for Wales.
What about the new manager, though? Have you got some speculation going on who the New England manager is going to be?
Well, I think somebody was talking about Gareth Southgate, but believe it or not, I heard Jurgen Klinsmann's name batted about earlier and on a list. And
he'd be a breath of fresh air if they're going foreign.
Well, yeah, but I can't see it in any way.
In these Brexit days, you would have thought the demand for an English manager might be too strong.
Yeah, well, Arsene Wenger's been also mooted, I'm told, yeah. and can you? Well, I think the fans ideally would prefer a British manager or an English manager rather for England, but at the end of the day, they've got to pick the best man who'll actually put their name above the parapet.
I heard some talk on Talk Sport last night when I was going home about Big Sam Allardyce. Now. It's true that Sam has never won anything. It's true that he's never managed one of the big clubs. It's true that he's never taken clubs into European competition. But I heard a caller make this point, and I commend it to you as I'm one of his admirers. There's there's no question that if Sam Allardyce is the England manager, then every player will have to put a real shift in the national jersey. There'll be no room for slacking or prima donnas. He's a hard, tough, very English type of manager. And as I look at the overpaid, preening, overrated England team that just crashed out to Iceland, that might be what's needed.
Well, yeah, I think you're right. I think the players need to be more fearful of the manager than fearful of losing, and then we might, because I think what happened. I mean, I read somewhere this morning that they could have been more fearful of the outcome of losing, that they lost the plot completely.
They seemed like very, very nervous, no doubt.
Yeah,
it's hard to believe, though, isn't it? Nervous about playing Iceland.
Well, yeah, yes, absolutely. But I just think we don't believe in ourselves enough, and I think that's the trouble with a lot of footballers. That they've closeted from an early age these days, and they kind of they don't know fear or whatever until they are faced with it in these tournaments.
Yeah. Well, I think the problem is they think too much of themselves rather than the other way around. Look, Chris, it's been a pleasure talking with you this week. I'm only on Fridays normally, so this will possibly be our last time. The very best of luck. I'm a big supporter of Metro. Thanks for joining us. That was the paper review with Metro. Get your fix of news, sport and showbiz every weekday morning. Pick up your free copy of Metro tomorrow.
The paper review on Talk Radio with Metro. Grab your free copy tomorrow morning.
Okay, it's Last Chance Saloon. To call me 0844 499 1000. That's the number to call. Or you can contact me by text, by email, or by Twitter, as Jim Swanky has done. It seems people prefer false smiles, lies and rhetoric to sincerity, honesty and integrity. Well, again, Jim, I make the same point I made in relation to Stephen B's point. If the contender against Jeremy Corbyn had a dazzling false smile, if she had the remotest grasp of rhetoric, I'd think you had a point. But she's as dull as dishwater. That is the long and the short of it. Spam Fritters says, yes, he is a Labour man, but not a leader. He does not inspire or reach the parts necessary to be a Prime Minister. Well, Spam Fritters, I don't agree with that. But when you look at the alternative, and the alternative is Angela Eagle, I'm asking you, what ability to inspire or reach the parts necessary to be a PM she has? Let's hear from Michael in Lancashire. Go ahead, Michael.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to talk about basically the national debt, and more specifically the interest rate that we pay on the UK national debt per year, which is, I think, roughly about 40 billion a year of the interest rate. And I want to basically ask your opinion. Why can't we simply pass a law to sort of outlaw interest rate on government national debt?
Well, because nobody would lend us money.
Well, I mean, why can't we? I thought every government could set up their own treasury and some lend the government the money with no.
Well, I agree with that, but that's called socialism, Michael. That's what the Chinese government does. It produces bonds which fund its gigantic public infrastructure projects. So if it's going to build one of these bullet railway lines, then it issues credit to the companies that are going to build it. And thus it gets quicker, cheaper public infrastructure development than we do when we're reliant here on commercial banking.
Right, okay.
I agree. But you have to be prepared to have a very different kind of society if you're going to have that. You can't do that within some kind of lacunae within the capitalist system. because the financial system would not be able to accommodate that. Okay, Michael, thanks for the call. Slightly off topic. 0844 499 1000. Levi Jordan says, amazing how quickly Eagle has recovered from her tears. Perhaps Angela Phoenix would be more fitting. And Peter Caldwell says the Westminster bubble is popping. Well, I think that might be right. The Lego Jedi says, yeah, George, crocodile tears. These are weak, pointless, ineffectual people. And Martin Walton says, I think he's referring to Tom Watson. He has not got the guts to run, as the rank and file of the party will return Jeremy Corbyn. And Anna Michiara says, George, will you be our next PM? Pretty please. Well, I'd like to be your PM, but for the moment, I'm just the host of the mother of all talk shows. Let's hear from Rhys in South Wales. Go ahead, Rhys.
Hi, George.
Hi.
It's just a quick one on Angela Eagle putting her name out there to contend against Jeremy. I don't think she's going to be the only one. I think there's going to be another one as well.
Oh, who's that?
I think it could be Hilary Benn. And the reason is because I think...
I thought they'd agreed on a unity candidate.
What do you mean a unity candidate?
Well, sorry, I know that sounds ridiculous. That sounds ridiculous. A unity candidate amongst the breakers of unity.
Oh, the bandits, you mean? Yeah.
Well,
yeah. Well, we'll call them the bandits for the minute anyway. But
I think that's far too kind a word for them, I must say.
Well, they'll have the smokies.
Desperados.
Desperados would probably be, yeah. But my point being is, I think it's going to be, if the party does split, I think my opinion is that it might push Labour into the wilderness for some time. And the reason I think that is because Jeremy connects very well with, we'll say, the social media voter. The tabloid voter, not so well, because what's reported in the tabloids is nonsense at the junk.
Well, Rhys, I'll let you continue in a minute, but let me just put some counter arguments to you. Jeremy, the reason that they've waited 9 months is because Jeremy Corbyn has won 4 straight successive by-elections, parliamentary by-elections, increasing the majorities in, I think, all cases. The Labour Party has won back Bristol. They won the Labour mayoralty off the Tories by a big margin. And in the local election results, they improved their position on 2015. So there actually isn't any electoral evidence that Jeremy Corbyn's leadership has been other than positive, despite the tabloids.
No, I completely agree with you. The consistency in everything that you just said there is that, and in what we found in the referendum, is Jeremy wins when you get to hear Jeremy. That's my point. Is on social media you can hear Jeremy. In the media, the tabloid media, you don't hear Jeremy. You hear opinions about Jeremy. You don't actually hear what Jeremy said. It's a paraphrase from Neverland, is what you hear in the tabloid.
Yeah.
So I find my point being...
Of course, that's been made much worse, Rhys, by the constant, absolutely daily attack upon him behind his back from his own MPs.
Yeah. Well, which is, that it's despicable in themselves. They're not representing anybody in the community. They're not getting in touch with the people in the constituencies to find out what they want, which is probably the biggest insult of all, is that they don't go out into the community. I remember as a kid I used to see Labour in our community now, where it's been played since 2000 or 2001. Labour were prominent in the community. You'd see the Labour MP, you'd see them out and about. There would be Labour everywhere. Even the halls, the welfare halls, the Labour halls that were built with working people's money and pennies from pensioners, they're disappearing. They're not Labour anymore, and it's a shame. But
well, that's a key question. When I was first elected into a leading position in the Labour Party in Scotland, so I'm talking about the middle of the 1970s, 1975, I was the youngest ever member of the Scottish Labour Party executive, and I became the youngest ever chairman of the Labour Party in Scotland at the age of 26. The leader of the Labour Party then was a man called Willie Ross. He was in Harold Wilson's cabinets in the 60s and in the 70s. You thought that you were sitting in the presence of the King of Scotland when Willie Ross was there. He was a powerful man. He exuded competence, certainty, direction. He was somebody of substance. But when I look now at like the shadow cabinet people who resigned, when I look at them, I mean, most of them would not be fit to serve the tea to Willie Ross or to previous generations of Labour leaders. Do you see my point?
Yeah, well, they wouldn't enter the hall that Willie Ross was in, or the village that Willie Ross was in, perhaps. But I think the key to it is that the key to longevity is people like yourselves, people like Tony Benn, and people like Dennis Skinner. Dennis Skinner's been in his seat for forever, and there's a good reason for it.
Yeah, of course.
Because he speaks his mind and he speaks for working class people.
I think you need a bit of charisma, in politics, Rhys. And I'm sorry, but Angela Eagle has zero charisma.
As dull as a brush. Yeah.
Well, look, it's been great talking to you again, and more than once this week, so I'm grateful to you. Let me just read some more messages in the time I've got left available. Ricardo says, if Corbyn is such a nightmare for Labour, it's pretty strange that Cameron wants him to go as well. Sorry, that's from Martin Seath. And Esbert says, you think Jeremy could be Prime Minister? Yes, I definitely do. James says, the old whispering stool pigeon fancies her chances as Labour leader. Good luck with that one, cocker. Well, I've no idea what that means, James. Let's hear one last caller. Yes, we've got time. Robert is in Derry. Robert, welcome.
George, thank you for having me on.
You're welcome, sir. Go ahead.
George, it's just a very quick one. Clearly, when you look at the media, you hear a lot around the problems that's facing Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah.
And I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on the solution, because I think Jeremy Corbyn has handled himself, as always, in a very dignified manner, and I think if he were to propose a solution, it would probably be drowned out by the media. And I was just wondering, in his shoes, what would you do to try and, I suppose, bridge the gap and move forward towards what he would view as a successful outcome?
Well, he reached out to all these people, Robert, and he reached out to them far too much and far too comprehensively. So that, for example, he was bounced into his position on the European Union by Hilary Benn, who rewarded him by stabbing him in the back, secretly ringing round other shadow cabinet members to try and get a mass walkout of the shadow cabinet. He should never have appointed Hilary Benn. He should never have accepted the diktat of Hilary Benn on the European Union. He could have done what Harold Wilson did in 1975 and said, look, Labour doesn't have a position on this referendum. Everyone is free to tell you what they think. And he could have told people what he really thought. And so that was a big mistake. And then, of course, he kept Hilary Benn in that position, even when Benn, standing next to him in the House of Commons, got cheered to the echo by the Tories for a warmongering, tub-thumping piece of jingoism called a speech, which was hailed by all his enemies and praised by none of his friends. And I could go on. So I would have, look, I'm half an Irishman, Robert, so I'm entitled to say, like the Irishman when asked to wait somewhere, well, I wouldn't have started from here. I wouldn't have started from here. We'll continue this conversation, I hope, Robert, and the rest of you, on Friday, when the mother of all talk shows returns. I've got to say goodnight now and hand over to Ian, where his masterful show coming up next. It's been a pleasure being here, and I'll be back, God willing, on Friday for the mother of all talk shows.